Hi there, and welcome. Before we begin, take a deep breath with me. Now let it go. Today's story is for anyone who's ever felt like they were running on empty. For the high achievers, the caretakers, the perfectionists, and the quietly exhausted. This is my story. A story of breaking down and choosing to rebuild, not by doing more, but by doing less. This is the radical act of resting, how I reclaimed my health and my life. The hum of the fluorescent lights was a constant maddening drone, a fitting soundtrack to the unraveling I felt happening deep within my bones. For years, I had chased the shimmering mirage of success, fueled by caffeine and the relentless pressure to achieve. I ticked off milestones like items on a never-ending to-do list: perfect grades, prestigious internships, a high-powered job in a cutthroat industry, the ever-elusive perfect relationship. Each accomplishment was a fleeting high, followed by the crushing weight of expectation to do even more. The hamster wheel spun faster and faster, and I, the exhausted rodent, clung on for dear life, convinced that stopping meant falling irretrievably behind. My body, bless its stubborn resilience, began to stage a revolt. First, it was the headaches, sharp and persistent, that throbbed behind my eyes, blurring the edges of my vision. Then came the insomnia, the cruel irony of lying awake, wired and anxious, desperate for the sleep I so desperately needed. My stomach churned with a constant low-grade nausea, and my muscles ached with a fatigue that no amount of sleep could alleviate. I ignored these warning signs, dismissing them as temporary inconveniences, collateral damage in the pursuit of my ambitious goals. I popped painkillers, guzzled more coffee, and pushed myself harder, convinced that I could power through. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at a spreadsheet filled with numbers that swam before my eyes. My head was pounding, my stomach was in knots, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My fingers trembled as I reached for my coffee mug, and suddenly, inexplicably, I began to weep. Great, shuddering sobs racked my body, and I couldn't stop them. My colleagues, initially concerned, quickly averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the display of such raw emotion. I stumbled to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and continued to cry until I felt utterly empty, drained of all energy and will. That day, I didn't go back to my desk. I walked out of the office, leaving behind my laptop, my phone, and my carefully constructed professional facade. I walked until my legs ached, until the city noises faded into a distant murmur, until I found myself standing in a small park, surrounded by trees and birdsong. I sat on a bench, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to simply be. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was anticlimactic: chronic fatigue syndrome, exacerbated by stress and burnout. The doctor, a kind woman with tired eyes, explained that my body had been running on fumes for too long and that it was now demanding a complete and total shutdown. She prescribed rest, gentle exercise, and a radical reassessment of my priorities. Her words felt like a lifeline, a permission slip to abandon the relentless pursuit of achievement and embrace a slower, more sustainable way of living. But choosing rest was not easy. It was a revolutionary act, a rebellion against the deeply ingrained societal norms that equated worth with productivity. My inner critic, a relentless taskmaster, constantly whispered doubts and accusations. "You're being lazy," it hissed. "You're wasting your potential. You're letting everyone down." I had to actively silence that voice, to remind myself that my health, my well-being, was not a luxury but a necessity. I began to dismantle my life, piece by piece. I quit my high-powered job, much to the dismay of my family and friends, who couldn't understand why I would throw away such a promising career. I ended my relationship with my boyfriend, who, while well-meaning, was unable to grasp the depth of my exhaustion or the need for profound change. I moved out of my expensive city apartment and into a small cottage in the countryside, surrounded by nature and far from the pressures of urban life. In the beginning, I felt adrift, purposeless. I was so used to being busy, to having a schedule crammed with appointments and obligations, that the sudden emptiness felt unsettling. I spent my days sleeping, reading, and wandering through the fields, feeling like a stranger in my own life. But slowly, gradually, something began to shift. As my body began to heal, so did my mind. The constant anxiety began to subside, replaced by a sense of quiet contentment. The headaches faded, the insomnia eased, and my energy levels slowly began to climb. I rediscovered the simple pleasures of life, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the scent of wildflowers in the air, the taste of fresh baked bread. I learned to listen to my body, to respect its limits, and to honor its needs. I practiced yoga and meditation, finding solace in the stillness and a deeper connection to my inner self. I spent hours in the garden, nurturing plants and watching them grow, a tangible reminder of the slow, patient rhythm of nature. I also began to explore my creative side, something I had long neglected in the pursuit of more practical pursuits. I started painting, writing poetry, and playing the piano, activities that brought me joy and a sense of fulfillment that transcended any professional accomplishment. I realized that my worth was not defined by my productivity, but by my capacity for love, compassion, and creativity. My journey was not without its challenges. There were days when the fatigue returned with a vengeance, days when I doubted my decision to abandon my former life, days when I felt overwhelmed by loneliness and isolation. But I learned to ride those waves, to accept the ebb and flow of my energy, and to trust that even in the darkest moments, healing was still possible. Over time, I began to connect with others who had also experienced burnout and chronic fatigue. I joined online support groups, attended workshops, and shared my story with anyone who would listen. I discovered that I was not alone, that there was a growing movement of people who were questioning the cult of productivity and embracing a more sustainable, holistic way of living. I started a blog, chronicling my journey and sharing tips and resources for others who were struggling with similar issues. To my surprise, it quickly gained a following. People resonated with my honesty and vulnerability, with my willingness to challenge the status quo and prioritize my well-being. I received countless messages from readers who felt seen and validated, who were inspired to make changes in their own lives, to prioritize rest, and to reclaim their health. My blog eventually led to other opportunities. I was invited to speak at conferences and workshops, to share my story with larger audiences. I wrote a book, a memoir of my burnout and recovery, which became a bestseller. I even started a small business, offering coaching and consulting services to individuals and organizations who were interested in promoting wellness and preventing burnout. But the most rewarding aspect of my work was the opportunity to connect with people on a deeper level, to empower them to take control of their health, and to create lives that were aligned with their values and their needs. I realized that my burnout, while painful, had been a catalyst for profound transformation, a wake-up call that had led me to a life of greater purpose, meaning, and joy. I learned that rest is not laziness, but a form of resistance. It is a refusal to participate in a system that demands our constant labor, that values productivity over well-being, that equates worth with achievement. It is an act of self-care, a radical act of love, and a necessary step towards creating a more just and sustainable world. And so, I continue to choose rest every day, one breath at a time. I continue to listen to my body, to honor its limits, and to prioritize my well-being. I continue to share my story, to inspire others, and to advocate for a world where rest is not a luxury, but a right. My revolution is a quiet one, a slow and steady dismantling of the old paradigm, a gentle embrace of a new way of living. And it all started with a simple choice, the choice to rest. In the years that followed, the ripple effects of that initial choice spread further than I could have ever imagined. My advocacy for rest and mindful living didn't just impact individuals. It began to influence corporate culture. I consulted with companies struggling with employee burnout, helping them implement policies that prioritized employee well-being, such as mandatory vacation time, flexible work arrangements, and mindfulness training programs. It was slow progress, a constant uphill battle against ingrained habits and profit-driven motives. But I saw glimmers of hope in the growing awareness of the importance of a healthy work-life balance. I also became involved in community initiatives, organizing workshops on stress management, healthy eating, and self-care for underserved populations. I volunteered at local schools, teaching children about the importance of mindfulness and emotional regulation. I wanted to create a world where these skills were taught from a young age, preventing the kind of burnout and chronic stress that I had experienced. My personal relationships also deepened and evolved. My family, initially skeptical of my career change, gradually came to understand and appreciate my new path. They saw the positive impact it was having on my health and happiness, and they began to adopt some of my practices, prioritizing their own well-being and slowing down their hectic lives. I forged new friendships with like-minded individuals who shared my values and supported my mission. Perhaps the most significant change was in my relationship with myself. I learned to accept my imperfections, to forgive my past mistakes, and to cultivate a sense of self-compassion. I stopped striving for perfection and embraced the messy, imperfect reality of being human. I learned to celebrate my strengths and to acknowledge my weaknesses, knowing that both were essential parts of who I was. My journey had taken me from the brink of collapse to a place of profound healing and resilience. I had transformed my pain into purpose, my weakness into strength. I had discovered that true success is not measured by external achievements, but by inner peace, by the capacity to love and be loved, and by the ability to live a life that is authentic and meaningful. The world still spins. The pressures still exist, but I now navigate them with a different perspective, a different set of tools. I know when to push myself and when to pull back, when to say yes and when to say no. I know that my worth is not contingent on my productivity and that my value extends far beyond my accomplishments. And so I continue to rest, to recharge, to replenish my soul. I continue to advocate for a world where rest is not a luxury, but a fundamental human right. I continue to believe that by prioritizing our well-being, we can create a more just, sustainable, and compassionate world for all. This isn't just a story about burnout. It's a story about reclaiming our lives, about choosing ourselves, and about the revolutionary power of rest in a world obsessed with constant motion. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the most radical thing we can do is simply stop. Really, truly stop and listen to what our bodies and souls are trying to tell us. The answers, the healing, the true path forward, they're all there, waiting in the silence. We just need to create the space to hear them. Beyond the personal and the professional, my advocacy extended to the political realm. I began to lobby for policies that supported workers' rights, including paid sick leave, affordable health care, and access to mental health services. I argued that these were not merely benefits, but essential components of a healthy and productive society. I challenged the narrative that framed these policies as entitlements, arguing instead that they were investments in human capital, in the well-being of our citizens. I joined forces with other activists and organizations to raise awareness about the detrimental effects of overwork and chronic stress on public health. We organized rallies, launched social media campaigns, and published research highlighting the economic and social costs of burnout. We demanded that policymakers take these issues seriously and implement solutions that would protect workers from exploitation and promote a culture of well-being. Our efforts were met with resistance from powerful corporate interests and conservative politicians who were invested in maintaining the status quo. They argued that our proposals would stifle economic growth and undermine individual responsibility. But we persisted, undeterred by their opposition. We knew that we were fighting for a better future, a future where people were valued for their humanity, not just their productivity. Slowly but surely, we began to make progress. Some states and cities passed laws mandating paid sick leave and providing greater protections for workers' rights. Some companies began to experiment with alternative work models, such as shorter work weeks and remote work options. And more people began to speak out about their experiences with burnout and chronic stress, creating a groundswell of support for change. The movement for rest and well-being was not just a personal journey. It was a collective effort, a social and political movement that was transforming the way we think about work, health, and happiness. It was a reminder that we are not just cogs in a machine, but human beings with inherent dignity and worth. And it was a call to action, a challenge to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, not just survive. My story became a symbol of this movement, a testament to the power of individual action and the possibility of collective change. I was no longer just a burnout survivor. I was a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the marginalized, and a beacon of hope for a world that was desperately in need of healing. And it all started with a simple choice, the choice to rest, the choice to heal, and the choice to create a better future for myself and for all. It started with recognizing that my health, my well-being, my very existence was revolutionary. And so is yours. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, even in the smallest way, I hope you'll give yourself the permission to pause, to breathe, to rest. Because your worth isn't measured by how much you do, but by how fully you live and how gently you treat yourself in the process. If you found value in this story, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it too. And remember, choosing rest isn't giving up. It's waking up to a better, more honest, more compassionate way of living. Take care of yourself. You are not alone.